Bunker smelled like copper and old concrete and something else. Something that had no name before the world ended. A chemical sweetness the infected left behind on every surface they touched. Like perfume from a species humanity hadn't yet learned to mourn. Race noticed it the moment they dragged the new one in. He always noticed it first. They called him the translator. He hadn't asked for the title. It had simply accreted around him, the way titles do in the aftermath of catastrophe, when the survivors need to organize their fear into something with a name on it. His real name was Dario Reyes. He was 34 years old, originally from Tucson, Arizona, formerly a xenolinguistics PhD candidate at the University of New Mexico. He had been writing his dissertation on non-verbal communication structures in cephalopod intelligence when the Vorkai arrived. That was 14 months ago. He was the only person on Earth, as far as anyone could verify, who had been stung by a Vorkai tendril and not died. He wasn't sure that was something to celebrate. The stinger had caught him in the shoulder during the second week of the occupation, when the Vorkai were still testing the boundaries of what could be killed and what couldn't. He had felt the venom move through him like cold fire, felt his vision split into wavelengths he had no words for, felt his thoughts reorganize themselves around a new and terrible grammar. He'd passed out in a drainage ditch and woken up 3 days later with yellow rings around his irises, a migraine that lasted 6 weeks, and the ability to understand what the Vorkai were saying to each other. Not just their language, their emotional register, the sub-auditory carrier frequencies that ran beneath the clicks and resonances, the ones that communicated intent and hierarchy and contempt. He understood their contempt better than anything else. They broadcast it constantly, like a radio station that only played one song. Shh. The new captive was different from the others. Reyes stood in the corridor outside the containment cell and looked through the reinforced polymer viewport and tried to read what he was seeing. Most of the Vorkai they brought in were the equivalent of soldiers, hive operational units, running on distributed intelligence, responding to stimuli with the elegant brutality of a system that hadn't needed to doubt itself in 600,000 years. They came in fast, and they came in loud, and they died the same way, yellow eyes wide, tendrils still reaching. This one sat. That alone was extraordinary. The Vorkai didn't sit. They perched, they coiled, they spread themselves flat against surfaces in the pressure distribution posture that preceded a strike. This one had arranged itself in the center of the cell, with its primary limbs folded inward and its resonance organs quiet. And it was doing the Vorkai equivalent of waiting, which meant it was doing the Vorkai equivalent of thinking about something other than the immediate present, which meant it was, in some functional sense, patient. "I want to talk to it," Reyes said. Commander Vasquez crossed her arms. She was a compact woman in her late 40s who had run a CDC outbreak response team before the Vorkai came and had spent the 14 months since running the underground research facility they'd built in a decommissioned missile silo outside Albuquerque. She had the expression she always had when Reyes said something she was going to agree to while simultaneously wishing she didn't have to. "You said that about the last 3, she said. "The last 3 were operational units. They weren't thinking, they were executing. This one is different." "Different how?" "It's been stung," Reyes said. "Look at the secondary resonance fin on the left lateral. See that scarring? Something happened to it. Some kind of venom exposure. It's not running standard hive protocol." Vasquez looked at the viewport for a long time. "You think it can tell us where the nexus point is?" "I think it might be the nexus point," Reyes said. "Or close to it. The Vorkai don't send anything this cognitively distinct into a forward zone unless it has a specific purpose. Either it's here to find something, or it is the thing they're looking for. That doesn't make any sense." "Nothing they do makes sense in human terms," Reyes said. "That's not the right frame. In their terms, it makes complete sense. They found whatever they're looking for, and they sent the most cognitively advanced member of their current deployment to verify the find. Something in this zone matters to them. Something in this zone might be what ends this." Vasquez uncrossed her arms. To them again, looked at the viewport one more time. 20 minutes, she said. "Sidearm. Door stays locked. The moment it moves toward you." "I know," Reyes said. He'd been through this before. The cell was 7 meters by 7 meters, poured concrete, titanium-reinforced door, air scrubbers running at triple capacity, because Vorkai biochemistry produced compounds that corroded standard HVAC filters in under 2 hours. Reyes had requested a chair. Someone had slid one in through the equipment slot, a folding metal chair with a cracked plastic seat, the kind of chair that belonged in a church basement or a high school gym. He set it up 3 meters from the Vorkai, sat down, put his hands on his knees, palms up. In the posture he'd learned meant non-aggression in Vorkai body language, an exposure of the ventral surfaces, a surrender of the attack-ready positioning. Vorkai's resonance organs stirred. Reyes waited. He had learned early that patience was the only currency that worked in these conversations. The Vorkai measured intelligence in part by the capacity to tolerate silence without filling it, and every human they'd encountered so far had failed that test instantly, either by attacking or by making noise. Reyes sat in his cracked plastic chair and breathed and let the silence be what it was. After 4 minutes, the Vorkai spoke. It wasn't speech in any human sense. It was a layered emission. 3 simultaneous frequency bands. The primary carrying syntactic information, the secondary carrying emotional valence, the tertiary carrying something Reyes had come to think of as citation, a reference to shared context. It said, in the nearest human approximation, "You are the damaged one," Reyes answered in kind, producing the sounds with his throat and nasal cavity in the way that 14 months of practice had made almost natural. His accent was terrible, and his tonal range was limited by human anatomy, but he was comprehensible. He said, "I was changed, not damaged." The Vorkai's primary resonance organ shifted frequency slightly. The carrier wave that accompanied the shift was something Reyes recognized from hundreds of hours of transcription and analysis. It was the Vorai equivalent of a raised eyebrow. Interest, shaded with something that might have been amusement. "The word is the same," it said. "In your language," Reyes said. "Not in mine." The silence that followed was different from the silence before. Previous silence had been assessment. This one was consideration. "You understand our tongue," the Vorkai said. "You did not learn it. You absorbed it through the venom, yes. We have encountered this before," it said. "In other places, in other species, it does not usually produce understanding. It usually produces madness." "I had some of both," Reyes said. Tertiary frequency band shifted. That citation frequency, referencing something. Reyes had learned to pay careful attention to the tertiary band. It was where the real information lived. The stuff the Vorkai said without saying. The way English speakers communicate volumes in a shrug or a pause. What the tertiary band was doing now was something he'd only heard twice before. In recordings of Vorkai field commanders during what appeared to be tactical briefings. It was a frequency structure that indicated the communication of significant intelligence. It was the sound of something that mattered being said. "You want to know why we came here," it said. "Yes, you believe we came to consume, to colonize. To add this world to the count of worlds we have processed. That is what it looks like from the inside," Reyes said. "It is not wrong," it said. "It is not complete." The tertiary frequency shifted again, and this time Reyes felt it in his chest, in the residual sensitivity the venom had left him with. A vibration that carried, beneath all the linguistic information, something he could only describe as grief. Not human grief, not the hot and immediate thing that humans carried. Something older, something that had had a very long time to calcify. "We came because we are ending. The Vorkai are dying. Not here, everywhere. The venom that made us what we are has been degrading across 60,000 years of reproduction. We are losing our capacity for distributed cognition. We are becoming individual, isolated. Came here because your biochemistry, across 37 surveyed worlds, is the only substrate in which the degraded enzyme can be stabilized." Reyes sat very still in his cracked plastic chair. "Here," he said carefully, "because you need something from us. We are here because you are the cure." The silence after that was very long. He sat with Vasquez in the operation center for 2 hours and said everything he'd heard and watched her face process it. She was not a woman who showed her reactions quickly. She had spent 14 months making decisions in conditions that would have broken most people, and the cost of that was visible in the economy of her expressions. The way she had learned to hold everything interior until she was ready to deploy it as action. When Reyes finished, she was quiet for a while. Then she said, "It could be lying. Yes. The Vorkai have used misdirection before. The Auckland incident. Thing in Helsinki. Yes, a story about dying could be a way to get us to lower our defenses." "It could be," Reyes said, "but the tertiary carrier frequency doesn't lie. I've been transcribing their communications for over a year. The tertiary band is involuntary. It's the substrate of their expression, the layer beneath the layer they control. What I heard in that cell wasn't a constructed deception. It was grief." He paused. "Old grief. The kind that's been there so long it's just part of how you breathe." Vasquez looked at the wall map. It was covered in pins. Red for confirmed Vorkai activity zones, blue for human enclave positions, yellow for the dead zones where neither had presence and which were either uninhabited or too dangerous to scout. There were a lot of yellow pins. "If it's true," she said slowly, "that changes the operational picture entirely." "It changes everything," Reyes said. "We can't verify it independently. We don't have the science. We have Dr. Okonkwo. She's been running venom exposure analysis on my blood for months. She said 2 weeks ago that she was seeing enzyme structures she couldn't explain, configurations that didn't match any known human biology. But that looked, and I'm quoting her, like they were trying to stabilize something." Reyes leaned forward. "What if they weren't trying to stabilize something in me? What if they were already being stabilized by me? By what my immune system did when it fought the venom?" Vasquez turned from the map, saying your blood might be the cure. "Not for us. For them. I'm saying it might be related to the cure for them. I'm saying we should find out." He met her eyes. "Because if the Vorkai came here to die slowly, or to find the thing that might stop them dying slowly, then this isn't an invasion with an exit condition we can force. It's a dying species doing what dying species do. Thrashing, consuming, taking. And they won't stop until they're gone or until we give them a reason to stop. And you think you can negotiate that reason? I think I'm the only one who can try." The Vorkai who sat in the containment cell had a name. It took Reyes 3 more sessions to get it. Because the Vorkai naming convention was not a fixed label, but a complex of frequencies that described the resonant signature of an individual's cognition. Something like a fingerprint, something like a musical key. The nearest human approximation was a word that sounded, when Reyes said it aloud, like the syllable rendered in low wind. Something like Chavrin. He stopped using the designation in his reports and started calling it the professor. Partly because of the deliberate cadence of its speech, partly because of the quality of its attention. It listened the way academics listen, not for what you were saying but for what you were working toward, for the shape of the argument you hadn't fully constructed yet. It had a way of occupying silences that forced you to fill them with your actual meaning, rather than your prepared version of your meaning. "You've spoken with this thing 17 times in 10 days, said Sergeant Major Delgado, in the tone he always used when he was about to say something Reyes was going to disagree with. Delgado was 46. Former Force Reconnaissance Marine, current head of facility security, and the person most consistently opposed to the entire program. He was not a cruel man. He had simply watched 12 people die in the first week of the occupation, and had organized the remainder of his worldview around preventing more deaths. And everything about Reyes's work struck him as a vector for more deaths. "You're starting to sound like you like it." "I find it interesting," Reyes said. "It killed a lot of people. The professor specifically. The Vorkai generally." "Yes," Reyes said. "And I don't know how to hold that, alongside what it's telling me. I don't know how to hold any of this alongside anything. I'm a linguist who talked to octopuses for 3 years. And now I'm apparently trying to negotiate the survival of 2 species, and I find the alien in the box more comprehensible than most of the humans in this facility. I'm aware of how that sounds." Delgado looked at him for a long time. "I'm not saying you're wrong," he said finally. "I'm saying be careful. I'm always careful. You're never careful. You're smart. Those aren't the same thing." The conversation that changed everything happened on the 19th day. Reyes had come in earlier than usual. 4 in the morning, the facility at its quietest. only the night shift and the hum of the air scrubbers and the intermittent drip from the condensation pipe in Corridor 3. He hadn't slept. He'd been awake since midnight, running calculations he couldn't stop running, the numbers from Okonkwo's most recent blood analysis cycling through his head. Professor was awake. It was always awake. Reyes wasn't sure the Vorkai slept in any way a human would recognize. He sat down in his chair, put his hands on his knees, said, in Vorkai, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth." The professor's resonance organs produced the frequency Reyes had come to recognize as its version of attention. "I have not lied to you," it said. "I know," Reyes said. "I'm not accusing, I'm—" He stopped. Tried to find the Vorkai construction for what he needed to say. Some concepts didn't exist in Vorkai, and those he had to approach obliquely, through structures that gestured at the meaning without landing on it. "I'm asking because I need to understand the stakes, not for the negotiation. For myself," the professor waited. "Your species came here dying," Reyes said. "If you find what you need from human biochemistry, what happens to us? To the humans who are not part of the solutions you're looking for. Do you stop?" The tertiary frequency band moved in a complex pattern Reyes had to close his eyes to parse. When it finished, he opened them. "That is not a question we have decided," the professor said. "The hive does not have a fixed position. There are those who would stop. There are those who believe the only safe solution is total replacement. This is what your kind would call a political question, and it has not been resolved." "What do you believe?" Reyes asked. A very long silence. "I believe," the professor said, "that a species capable of producing the thing that is in your blood, a biological response that elegant, that adaptive, that specifically targeted at stabilizing the enzyme we have been losing for 60 millennia, is not an accident. That level of biochemical precision does not appear in random organisms. It appears in organisms that have been shaped by pressure, by struggle, by the kind of evolutionary history that makes something genuinely formidable." The tertiary band shifted again. "I believe that a species which can do what your immune system did when it encountered our venom is a species that would be very stupid to eliminate." Reyes sat with that for a long moment. "Because we're useful," he said. "Because you are extraordinary," the professor said. "Psst. And I say this as a member of a species that has surveyed 37 worlds and found nothing it could not process. You are the first thing we have encountered that we could not predict." He brought the recording to Vasquez the same morning. She listened to the whole thing, and when it was done, she sat back in her chair and stared at the ceiling for a long time in the particular way she had when she was building something complicated in her head. "The hive is split," she said. "Yes. Some faction wants to stop. Some faction wants to finish the occupation. It's more complex than that. It's not a binary. Professor is describing something like a political spectrum, a range of positions with different weight at different levels of hive command, shifting based on what information the hive receives. If we give them the information that their enzyme can be stabilized without total replacement, if we demonstrate it, give them proof they can process, that shifts the balance. Or," Vasquez said, "they take the information, take the cure, and then eliminate us anyway because we're no longer useful. That's possible. I need better odds than possible." "I don't have better odds," Reyes said. "I have this. Professor's been separated from the hive for 19 days. Kai do not voluntarily tolerate hive separation for more than 72 hours without significant cognitive deterioration. Professor is not deteriorating. It's thriving. It's the most cognitively active Vorkai I've encountered, and it's been cut off from distributed consciousness for nearly 3 weeks." He paused to let that land. "It's becoming something individual, something that has been in this room with a human being for 19 days, talking, and has developed, I don't know what to call it, friendship, not yet, but something, an orientation, a point of view. The professor is not a hive unit anymore. It is becoming a person, and I think it wants to live in a world where both our species get to keep existing." Vasquez was quiet. "You're betting everything on a vibe," she said. "I'm betting everything on a year of linguistic analysis and biochemistry and 19 days of direct communication," Reyes said. "Yeah. Also the vibe. The extraction team found the Nexus signal 3 days later. Okonkwo's analysis had given them the spectral signature to look for. The resonance band the Vorkai used to coordinate hive-level communication, and they'd triangulated it to a repurposed data center 30 kilometers north, which the Vorkai had converted into something that served the function of a distributed nervous system node. Whatever decisions were being made about humanity's future were being processed there. Vasquez gave the briefing herself. It was short. "We're not going in to destroy it," she said. "Going in to deliver a message. Reyes will transmit the venom stabilization data we've compiled, Okonkwo's enzyme analysis, the blood work from the past year, the structural models, everything that shows what human biochemistry does to the degrading enzyme. We transmit it into the Nexus node in a format the hive can process." Delgado had not been briefed on the content of Reyes's sessions with the professor. He'd been briefed on the operational parameters of the extraction. He had questions. And if they don't care about the data? If the kill order faction is already dominant, then we get out, Vasquez said, and we try something else. And if we can't get out, Vasquez looked at him steadily, then we find out what we're made of. Nobody laughed. It wasn't that kind of room. Delgado nodded. Once, which meant he'd accepted the answer. Reyes went back to the containment cell before the team deployed. He sat in his chair, hands on his knees. "We're going to the Nexus node," he said, in Vorkai. "We're going to send what Okonkwo found. Going to try to give your hive a reason to stop." The professor was quiet for a moment. Then it said, "You might die doing this." "Yes," Reyes said. "You are aware of this, yes, and you are doing it anyway." "We're not going to stop being what we are," Reyes said. "Just because what we are is inconvenient for everyone, including us." The professor's resonance organs went through a frequency pattern Reyes had never heard before. It was complex and sustained, and he had to focus to parse it. When he'd worked through all three bands, the tertiary frequency resolved into something that stopped him cold. It was the Vorkai word, the thing you carry forward from a teacher after the teacher is gone. The word for a lesson that has become part of the way you think. There was no single English translation. The nearest Reyes could get was inheritance, or the thing that changes you, or what you leave in something when you touch it. Professor was saying, "You have changed me." Reyes sat in his cracked plastic chair in the concrete room, in the bottom of a missile silo, and looked at the alien across from him, and felt something he hadn't felt in 14 months. Not hope exactly, something more specific. The sense that what was happening in this room was real, and that real things could matter, and that mattering was still possible even now. "I'll tell you how it goes," he said. In English, because some things didn't have a Vorkai translation. The Nexus node was housed in a server farm that the Vorkai had retrofitted with their own bioorganic relay architecture. Extruded polymer tendrils running between racks. Like a new nervous system growing through the skeleton of the old one. It was beautiful in the way that dangerous things are beautiful. Intricate, purposeful, completely indifferent to whether you appreciated it. Team moved in on foot: Reyes, Vasquez, Delgado, Okonkwo, and 4 of Delgado's people. It was just after dawn, the sky a pale gray frost on the ground. The kind of morning that would have been ordinary a year and a half ago. The kind of morning you used to complain about. There were 4 Vorkai units at the perimeter. Standard operational units. Not like the professor, no individual cognition, running on hive distribution. Delgado's people handled them with the quiet efficiency of people who had been doing this for a year. Reyes watched and felt the split he always felt, the thing he couldn't resolve. The units in the facility and the professor in the cell. The same species, one a tool and one a mind, and the impossibility of holding both of those things at the same time, without one of them canceling the other out. He didn't try to resolve it, he just kept moving. The server room was at the back of the facility. Past the ruined reception desk and the hallway of dead monitors and the collapsed section of roof, where something very large had come through at some point. The Vorkai relay architecture was densest here, the tendrils running floor to ceiling, pulsing with a slow bioluminescent rhythm that Reyes recognized from the professor's own resonance frequencies. The node was alive. It was thinking. Okonkwo had the transmission package ready. She'd spent 3 days compressing 14 months of analysis into a format calibrated to Vorkai sensory processing. frequency structures that the hive's distributed cognition could absorb and process. The data itself was in the patterns. You didn't need to understand it. You just needed to receive it and let your distributed intelligence do what distributed intelligence did. She connected her equipment to one of the relay tendrils. Looked at Reyes. You want to say anything first? He thought about it. He looked at the pulsing tendrils, the breathing architecture of an alien intelligence that was making decisions about whether his species lived or died, and he thought about the professor in its cell saying, "You are extraordinary," in the same frequency that carried grief. And he thought about the word for the thing a teacher leaves in you when they've taught you something real. "Send it," he said. The transmission took 11 seconds. What happened next took 11 minutes. It was the hive processing. Reyes could feel it, not hear it, not see it, but feel it in the residual sensitivity the venom had given him, the way he could feel Vorkai resonance frequencies in his chest and behind his eyes. The data moved through the relay architecture in waves, absorbed, redistributed, replicated. The distributed intelligence of the Nexus node. Chewing through 14 months of human biochemical research in 11 minutes because that was what 600,000 years of evolution produced when you needed to process something fast. Vasquez stood at his shoulder. Delgado and his people had the exits covered. Nobody spoke. Outside, a bird was doing something ordinary. Reyes couldn't identify the species. He'd been underground too long. After 11 minutes, the pulsing of the relay architecture changed rhythm. It slowed. Reyes stood in the server room and put his hand out and laid it very gently against one of the tendrils. Not because he needed to, but because he wanted to understand what was happening through more than just the secondary sensitivity, wanted the direct contact. Tendril was warm. It was always warm. Vorkai were endothermic in ways that still weren't fully understood. What he felt through the contact was, for lack of a better word, stillness. The kind of stillness that precedes a decision. The kind of stillness that means something is being weighed. They received the response 6 hours later, back at the facility. It came through the same relay architecture the Vorkai used for all hive-level communication. The broad-spectrum resonance broadcast that Reyes' modified equipment could now receive and, slowly, translate. It was long and complex, and he spent 3 hours working through it with Okonkwo at his side running the frequency analysis while he handled the semantic parsing. When he was done, he sat in silence for a while. Then he went to find Vasquez. She was in the operations room, running through logistics projections with 2 of her staff. She looked at his face and sent her staff out without being asked. "Tell me," she said. "The hive has accepted the data," Reyes said. "They've confirmed that what Okonkwo's analysis found is real. The enzyme stabilization is real. And human biochemistry can produce what they need without human elimination. The yield per individual is low but sustainable. They're proposing the word they use doesn't translate well. It's something between an agreement and a biological arrangement. An ongoing exchange. We provide the substrate. Provide." He stopped. "What?" Vasquez said. "What do they provide?" "Time," Reyes said. "Knowledge. They've been surveying habitable systems for 600,000 years. They have navigational records, stellar cartography, everything we'd need to expand beyond this system. They're offering access to 37 surveyed worlds." He paused. "Offering us the stars." Vasquez was very still. "In exchange for blood donations," she said. "Essentially, the specifics are complex. The enzymes can be synthesized from blood samples. It's not nobody's being farmed. It's more like a medical exchange, like organ donation, voluntary, regulated, ongoing." He exhaled. "It's not perfect. It's not what anyone would have designed if they'd been designing it. But the killing stops. That part is clear. The hive-level directive changes. The occupation ends and the kill order faction loses weight because the faction arguing for coexistence now has proof that coexistence is biochemically viable." Vasquez sat down. "Professor," she said. "Yes," Reyes said. It was in the response. "Professor is. The tertiary frequency structure around its identity is different now. It has more weight. More authority. It's been separated from the hive for 3 weeks, and it's been having conversations with a human, and now it has a political position, and apparently, in Vorkai terms, that's enough. Kroot, it has standing." Whatever it said to the hive about the transmission and what it meant, it mattered. It advocated for us, Vasquez said. It advocated for what it learned, Reyes said, which included us. He sat down across from her, his hands flat on the table, and looked at them for a moment, at the yellow rings in his irises, reflected in the table surface. 18 months of that, staring back at him. They want a meeting. An actual meeting, above ground, both sides present, to ratify the arrangement. They want to do it in, they specify an open space, something without walls. They find enclosed space cognitively stressful, which I didn't know, and now I'm realizing that explains a lot about the architecture of their occupation zones. When? 3 days. They want the professor present. As, he searched for the translation. As the one who carries the first exchange, change maker. The word they use is the same word the professor used to me. Inheritance. They want the professor to be the thing that was changed, that then changed the hive. To be visible at the ratification. Vasquez was quiet for a long time. Dario, she said. It was the first time in 3 months she'd used his name, instead of his role. What do you think the odds are that this is real? He thought about it. He thought about the tertiary band, and the grief frequency, and the word for the thing a teacher leaves behind. He thought about sitting in a cracked plastic chair, in a concrete room at 4 in the morning, and asking a dying alien about stakes, and the alien answering honestly. And what it felt like to be told by something 600,000 years older than your civilization, that you were extraordinary. I think the odds are better than they've ever been, he said. And I think they're still not good. And I think we have to try anyway. Vasquez nodded. It was a very small nod, but it held everything in it. Get some sleep, she said. 3 days. He went to see the professor before he slept. He sat in his chair, hands on his knees. The cell smelled the same as it always did. The copper-sweet residue, the presence. Professor's resonance organs were still but alert. The frequency that Reyes had learned to read as its version of looking at you. The hive responded, Reyes said. I know, the professor said. I felt it a pause. Even separated from the distributed structure, I can feel the major frequency shifts. Like feeling a change in air pressure before a storm. We're meeting in 3 days, Reyes said. Open ground, above the silo. You'll be there. Yes, the professor said. Are you afraid? Reyes asked. A long silence. The kind of silence that was working something out. I am experiencing something, the professor said, that I do not have an existing category for. It has the structural characteristics of what your kind calls fear, and also of what your calls anticipation, and also of something your language may not have a word for. The state of being aware that you are at the hinge of something, that what happens in the next moment will be different from every moment that came before it. We call that standing at the edge. Reyes said. Professor considered this. It said. That is accurate. I am standing at the edge. A pause. Are you? Reyes thought about Tucson, about cephalopods, about the drip of the condensation pipe in Corridor 3, and the bird he couldn't identify, and the 14 months of yellow rings in his irises, staring back at him from every reflective surface. About the stars the Vorkai were offering. 37 surveyed worlds. The navigational inheritance of a civilization that had been going longer than humanity had been walking upright. Yeah, he said. I am. He stood up. He picked up his chair. At the door he stopped. Professor, he said. The resonance organs moved. For what it's worth, Reyes said. I think you're extraordinary too. He went to bed. He slept better than he had in months. The morning of the meeting was clear and cold. The sky the blue of deep water. The kind of sky that made the world look like it was making a promise it intended to keep. They stood on the flat ground above the silo entrance. Vasquez and Delgado and Okonkwo and 8 others. And Reyes and the professor at Reyes's shoulder, its resonance organs slow and steady, its yellow eyes catching the early light. The Vorkai came from the north. There were 12 of them, in the loose, spreading formation they used when they wanted to signal non-aggression. No clustering, no closed perimeter. The arrangement of bodies that said, we are not preparing to strike. In front of the group was a larger individual, one Reyes's equipment tagged as carrying high authority hive weight, a senior resonance node in the distributed intelligence. 2 groups stood 40 meters apart on the frost-covered ground, and the wind moved between them and carried nothing except cold. and the smell of pine from somewhere far off. Reyes stepped forward. He spoke in Vorkai and he spoke clearly, in all three frequency bands to the limit of his human capacity, and he said, "We are here at the edge. On behalf of my kind I say, we have heard what you are. We have seen your grief and your need and your age. We are a young species, and we do not have the patience of 600,000 years. We have this. We have the biochemistry you need. We have the will to survive. And we have the peculiar stubbornness of a thing that has been nearly destroyed and has not stopped." He paused. "Let the frequency settle. We will not give you easy dominion. We will not be managed or processed or folded into your operational frameworks as a resource. We will be what we are, ungovernable, adaptive, and present another pause. We can be what we are alongside what you are, if you let us. And if you try." The high authority Vorkai was still for a very long moment. Then, it produced a frequency structure that Reyes had to close his eyes to fully parse. It ran through all three bands for nearly 20 seconds, complex and layered. And when it finished, he stood in the cold morning air and opened his eyes and felt the smile come before he could stop it. Vasquez touched his arm. What did it say? Reyes thought about the word for the thing a teacher leaves behind in you. The inheritance, the change. He thought about an alien in a cell discovering what it was like to have a point of view, a self. A moment in which it had stood at the edge of something and chosen. It said yes, he said. Behind him, Delgado made a sound that was not quite a laugh and not quite a sobs, and was somehow both at once. Conquo pressed both hands to her mouth. Frost crackled underfoot as the two groups began slowly to close the 40 meters between them. It wasn't peace. Peace was a thing you built over decades, over generations, in the slow accumulation of trust between entities that had reason not to trust each other. What this was the agreement to try. The decision to stand at the edge and not step back. In one of the 37 surveyed worlds, the Vorkai were about to share navigational records for there was, according to the professor's secondary data, which Reyes had been quietly reading for 3 weeks without authorization. A planetary system containing a world with liquid water and a reducing atmosphere and the chemical precursors for something that might, in a few million years, become life. He was going to suggest they leave it alone. Professor had agreed, when Reyes mentioned it, that this was probably wise. Extraordinary things, the professor had said, needed room to become what they were going to be. Put his hands in his pockets and walked forward into the frost-glittering space between his species and theirs. And overhead the sky held its blue and its promise, and the bird he still couldn't name called from somewhere in the pines, and the world turned underneath all of them, stubborn and unfinished, still going.